The member from Stormont Dundas and South Glengarry.
Thank you, Speaker, and I'm proud to rise today on behalf of my constituents, Stormont Dundas and South Glengarry, to talk to this Bill 151, the Waste Reduction, Waste-Free Ontario Act. Interesting title, because I know there's no such thing as waste-free, and I know it's a target that governments have been pushing for, and municipalities, because it's something that's been very expensive to look after the waste. There's been lots of ideas. I know that lots of the better ideas have been, I think, stifled by this government over the years. As we look through, coming through as the mayor of South Glengarry in my days, landfill costs were a huge cost. In some ways, rivaling what we spent on roads and bridges. Sometimes, we looked at it and really cost it. We didn't feel that for the millions we spent on approvals, question the merit of it or the benefit of it. The new authority, and we've had the government listen to some of the delegations that came forth, listen to the opposition parties themselves, and I think we had some changes that came through that we were quite happy with through the readings, a third reading. And we see the new authority must report on its progress in winding down expensive and inefficient agencies such as the Ontario Tire Stewardship, Ontario Electronic Stewardship, and the Ontario Stewardship Ontario. Lots of stewards there. I guess it just talks about the many agencies that are there and the trouble that businesses that are trying to function and profit and provide jobs in this province, what they're having. We saw lavish reports of lavish and wasteful spending by Ontario Tire Stewardship executives on the backs of Ontarians who had no choice to pay. The Ontario Tire Ship stewards decided to increase the tax on farm tires by 20 times, creating a massive issue for our agricultural sector. And I know on the surface it looks like, farmers will just pay more. They'll eat the cost. But my riding borders on the U.S. and it also borders on Quebec. And actually, I grew up in an area that's a mile from the border, and for most of my time before I went off to university, our address was actually Dalhousie Station, Quebec. That's where the post office was, and it caused, of course, all kinds of problems as things got a lot more official with health cards. If you went in, your address was Quebec, as you can imagine. So it forced the government of the day then to separate the post offices based on provincial line. I got a call from a tire distributor in Glen Robertson, just outside my riding by a couple miles, and in the Glengarry Prescott Russell riding, Glengarry Tire. And he says, what am I going to do? I'm selling to people like my brothers that go out and buy tires. You're putting a tax on my tires was $800. He said, I go down to, if anybody who wants to avoid the tax, they drive 5 miles down to Dalhousie, in Quebec, to the dealership. They don't have to pay it. He says, I might as well just shut down or move. And those are the issues we're looking at. When you bring in uncompetitive taxes, businesses are forced, in this case, are forced to either do something, but you can imagine trying to, I doubt his profit on the tires was $1,000 or $800. So likely does he start selling his product at a loss, or are we really sending out a message that we don't like his business and he can move? And those are the issues we run into. And, it's hard to justify somebody that gives you a call like that, because you understand it. And, I guess fortunately for my nephew who works at Comples in Dalhousie, he benefits from it, but the taxes don't come back to Ontario, and that's a problem. So the constituents also often complain in my office about extra fees and taxes to the purchases, and it affects their budget, it affects their spending, and when you add that to the cost of increased power costs, the increase of living in Ontario now, it really is bringing more and more people, because We got a province that sometimes brags about the jobs it's creating, but we have the largest percentage of minimum wage jobs in the country. That's Ontario. That's not something we had ever experienced before. So people in minimum wage are having a very hard time these days. And I know it's great to see that the Minister of Energy comes out with a program that helps people with minimum wage. But all that does is make sure that the rest of the population pays that, which raises the price for everybody else, which then turns around and increases the number of people that need help. It's just a vicious circle. And I think that, we have to be careful when we put fees on something like the recycling here, because there's no better way of letting of putting a system in place that allows the distributors, the people creating the garbage, the opportunity to save money. If it's just a government-imposed fee where they have no impact, there's no incentive for them to look at how to cut costs, cut the waste they're producing. And I think that was our clear message. We have to make sure that this bill allows manufacturers to actually cut waste, and if they cut it, they get rewarded for it, because that's the way our system works, and it's worked very well, and that's the way our competitors, the people we're competing with, that's the way they work as well. So it's interesting to see some of these things. The minister, another issue there, the minister must make progress reports available to the House on a regular basis. And we just see recently the Financial Accountability Officer showed that the government is not forthcoming with information that would enable the public and the MPPs to hold it to account. So just a couple of weeks ago, the Financial Accountability Officer issuing a letter to the House talking about an amendment that came forth that the government had promised was meet his concerns about the cap and trade bill, Bill 172, where he had come forth and said that the transparency wasn't there. The government was able to give out billions of dollars, not millions, billions of dollars in credits and in the taxes they were collecting, with no accountability. The committee I sit on, other deputies came through with that same message. Fortunately, we put some amendments. The third party as well put some amendments, and all voted down by the government. But the real telling part was at the end of the last amendment, the government rushed in at the last minute, put it on the table, and then told us. They told us that this was going to. They had discussed it with the Financial Accountability Officer, and he was very happy with what the amendment was, and that it handled it answered all his concerns. And then the next day we see a letter saying that, not only does it not answer my concerns, but they haven't even talked to me. And I know we're not allowed to use certain words in this House, but what else could it be? It's mind-boggling that this government would resort to that. We see the first debt retirement charge update given by the Ministry of Finance in 2012. Years late. This was years after it was supposed to be retired. Just recently done so. Where is this money going? They just can't come up with it's like the candy store. Anytime they get their hand in the jar, the money disappears, and we see that over and over again. Government acted only after the Auditor General issued a report. His job is not to babysit this government. That's just what we're seeing. He just reported, look, this is years after this has been retired. Why are you still charging it? Similar to the eco fee or the drive clean tests, overcharging and the tax coming back to the government, much more than the test cost, which is, of course, illegal. The government has, in this case here, was a fee for the service, and they were making, tens of millions of dollars off this. And that was the real reason why they didn't want to cut it, because the test no longer has any value. It's interesting, I was meeting with my some of the car companies in my riding just last week, and I asked some of the regulations that they would like to see eliminated. And they mentioned this drive clean. He says, we're doing it Yeah, the government's paying us for it, but it's a useless program because it just reads the computer. There's all kinds of problems. An issue that if they're going to do a safety check on it, you have to, through their program, it maybe applies more to the, not the actual dealers, but the second-hand car retailers, where they go and have to disconnect the battery at one point to do some of their tests. Well, then they have to drive around for 3, 4, 5 hours to drive 500 kilometers to reset the damn computer. I mean, and at first I thought that was a little bit of a story, but I bought a new vehicle last year and left the gas cap off for a few minutes. And of course the computer tripped and said there was engine trouble. It took over 500 kilometers to reset that in the summer, and it takes longer in the wintertime. Those are the type of things. So now they have to pay a staff member to go out and drive a car around for 5 hours. That's real time, real money. And you talk about a program that is a complete waste of time, energy, and money, and let alone putting an extra 500 kilometers on a vehicle, just so that they can reset the computer so it passes the test. I mean, one has to really think of what's going on here. So we look at the government reports. You look back no farther back than the gas plant scandal. Months and months of the committee trying to get these documents that they were entitled to. Only when committee went to full-day sessions in the summer were they actually able to pass a motion to release the documents. And then this government, as forthright as they are, months and months of denying until the Speaker ruled that they had to do it. They had to release these documents. And then when we get the documents, they're redacted. They're whited out, which again was not allowed. So this speaks to, the minister is very, they talk about progress reports, but, you can see why on the opposition we really are worried about, are they going to be forthright? Are we going to get really any information of substance? Or is just another case of information that we will never see? It looks good on paper, but again, you have to judge this government by its actions. Past actions should predict the future actions, and quite frankly, that would be rather scary. Other cases of obstruction include the refusal to comply with the committee's documents, information rules, refusal to disclose key fiscal, financial information. Making these progress reports mandatory doesn't make them happen. So we were hoping that we see a bit of a change here. Maybe we will. We'll take the government at its word, and that can be dangerous at times. Phasing out eco-taxes that drive up the consumer process and depress demand. The government is notorious for collecting vast sums of money and being unable to spend it wisely. And we see that today as record levels of revenue. They're well over double the revenue that they collected when they came to power. And yet we still see cuts in health care. We see demonstration schools being closed. We see autism being cut. So, it's an example of the taxes are there, but they aren't being spent wisely. The eco-taxes are regressive because they affect everybody, regardless of income. So we need to, take some of the burden off people that are really, challenged in this economy, challenged into making a good living, something that used to be very proud of, something that we used to see, residents from many other provinces come to Ontario because it was a land where you get a job. It's not that way anymore. The manufacturing industry and recycling industry have a role to play in ensuring that waste is reduced, and government must stop trying to manage it. Give them a target, let them work towards it, and give them a financial incentive. If they do a better job, or they're able to obtain revenue from it. If they don't do a good job, well, of course, then they have to pay for it. And I think that's really the only way we're going to encourage the ability to get in there and see improvements. Many different companies coming up with better ideas. That's infectious. People are comparing company to company. There's that drive to do a better job. If you don't reward them for doing a better job, it takes away that incentive. And unfortunately, the government, who's really has no incentive to ensuring that somebody does a better job. The incentive is hiring more cops to go out there and check that's really not an incentive, and it doesn't spur the same innovation as we hope to see. So we're looking at driving some competition. The economy thrives in competition. We're built on it. It's a constant pressure for businesses out to do the other, and I think that's what this bill really needs to get at. Let the industry look at ways to improve and let them benefit from those improvements. And when we set rates by the government, it just falls apart. The blue box is any recycling program, partnerships between the municipalities, manufacturers, and recyclers. All parties have a stake in making sure that it's a success. Manufacturers can reduce the downstream costs and improve their environmental credentials by ensuring their product does not go to landfill. And if there's a benefit to that, a revenue benefit, they will work at doing that. They will work at in their own stream to bring their product back to themselves so they can reuse the parts, and instead of using up a scarce resource. And recycling firms already have a ready and convenient supply chain for raw materials. As we see a lot of these materials, I know for instance, on the tire side, recycler in my area can't get enough tires. He would take more tires if he could, because he has a market for rubber bats. He sells them all over the world. He even put in a process that allowed him to take the huge truck tires, agricultural tires that are not that easy to recycle, but he put the process in place because he needed more supply, because it was a money-making venture for him. So I think those are the things we have to encourage. So instead of looking at a time where we can't get rid of tires, we see now such a competition for them. We're not using it up to send to the recycling stream. And we talk about some of the issues. I know I'm running kind of out of time here, but we had issues with waste diverters in our riding. And look at one of my landfill operators, large operator, who has put in place a system to generate electricity from the methane gas that's produced. He would like to be able to generate more electricity because he's flaring off gas, which of course is a carbon source. He has the system in place, the infrastructure's there, can't get approval from the government. He's been waiting for months and I guess years now. And one would think, well, maybe the government doesn't need the green energy in this case. But they just turned around and in my area gave two large wind turbine projects out just a few months ago, as well as a large solar project. So on one hand, we see a solution to their energy costs that is somewhat manageable. I mean, there is that ability to delay the production of the electricity till when it's more valuable to us. No, but we've gone ahead with a wind project that we have no controls on when it produces power. So I mean, is that an integrated plan, or is that just confusion? And I think that's what we're seeing. Another recycler company in my riding, a contract with the government to handle a lot of the recyclers, trying to add a basic shredder to the process. Can't get approval from the Ministry of Environment, taking months. I mean, this is they're shredding hard plastic. This is really not an environmental question. Why is it taking months? So that they're stopped, their warehouses are filling up with product because they can't recycle it. The market needs it. Government has enforcing is on their backs because they're not getting rid of their recycling material. And a simple shredder has held up the process for months and months and months. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. And it just shows, again, government getting in. And of course, I wouldn't really want to get into when I was involved in the Council of South Glengarry, the process it took to get our license on landfill extension. 6-7 years, $5 million on a site that that has a long time landfill site. Eventually the process was, we got approval for it, but it just speaks for government getting in the way. That was precious tax dollars that were wasted. They could have been put into roads and bridges, and in the end, it was just wasted and the time spent. And we had many meetings with the ministry, and it's time wasted and time wasted. So I see our time's up. So thanks, Speaker, for the opportunity to speak.
Good job. Good job. Thank you. Questions and comments? Member from Windsor-Tecumseh.